Welcome back, lovers, fighters, baby makers. Today, we're going to look at Sol on a BTC and USDT pair. We're going to look at Bitcoin a little bit and check out some different indicators and why they all show that we are still pretty bearish. Then we're going to very briefly look at some altcoins. Just want to fly through them and show basically the state of the market as the high caps, using those for representatives of the entire shitcoin market. So we're going to start with Sol very soon, but first, welcome back to the world's premier unintentional ASMR altcoin cast. If you have any requests, you can put them in the chat for me and I will check those out after we do Sol. First, I want to go to Sol on the Bitcoin pair because it's pretty representative of the DeFi market in general. These markings that I have are pretty old. I wouldn't consider these to be current anymore. I think if you go in to update these for recency, it's pretty okay. It's pretty okay as it is. You can see that these old marks from basically the top of this area and this interaction here kind of line up, but we want to make this new and accurate. So when I'm looking for something to mark, I'm basically just looking at the most recent price action and going right to left across the chart. And if I had to mark something here, some potential for support or resistance, I'd probably just look at the top of this current wave. And of course you want to see, does the absolute top of this go with anything? Kind of. It's close enough. We could mark something around here as being sort of our resistance. This is about the point it got to and died. So that's good enough for me. We don't really need something that matches up all the way across the board. If we're looking for kind of a range support, probably the bottom of this interaction here. We have the bottoms of all these candles and the tops of these, the ultimate breakthrough and retest. So I would be good with marking this as our current support. So what does this mean for us in Sol on a BTC pair? Well, it means we had a colossal breakout attempt that has failed and put us again below this resistance here. There are a lot of people who will want to mark something like this, maybe something like the top of this interaction. I don't know that that's too legitimate, but catching really the tops of this is mostly your concern. So I think that's fair enough, but if you're looking at the top of this, you're really discounting the fact that this most recent price action has really stalled out down here. So I don't like it as much. You might mark it as some kind of interim resistance if you really want to, but the meat of this is to say that if you're looking at Sol, you're looking at a series of higher highs right now. You're looking at a local uptrend, which is not even deviating very much from its mean. By that I mean that if you look at the swings above or below this line, it's really not gone out very far. When you look at something like Bitcoin's average price action, which has been down, and I'll just talk about Bitcoin for a second to illustrate Sol, you have sometimes very small swings out, but then as this trend continues, the swings are getting bigger and bigger, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about returning to your average price action. With Sol on the local uptrend, it's basically just a line all the way up to very recently where we had a small swing. So this is pretty stable right now, it seems. The only thing that I don't really like about it is that we have lost this breakout attempt. This breakout attempt, ideally you would have seen it retest the top of this current price action and continue upward. Instead, what we've seen is that it tried to escape and didn't, and then today, 13 hours into the daily candle, we've tested this again as resistance. So unless this terrible looking doji can get some strength behind it and move back up against this line, either in the close today or very quickly tomorrow, to show that we are in fact going to take this and turn it into a nice green line, we should expect some kind of failure here. I think this is not a place where you're going to sit around and crab after a breakout attempt. with this breakout attempt on the table, you know, when you do have some kind of breakout attempt, usually a pretty quick move down or a pretty quick reclaim and up. So in order to continue this nice uptrend on the Bitcoin pair, I think you have to either have Bitcoin really shit itself just so that the value of Bitcoin goes down across the board against alts, or you have to have Sol take this level very quickly, very, very quickly. You're hovering just above the EMA and you're not really progressing stupidly fast on the RSI. So it's promising, but it needs to follow through and it needs to do it very quickly. This is very much a decision point. You're not going to have this crabbing here and then a really shitty breakout attempt and then just continue sideways. It's not how price action tends to work. So, I mean, if you're some sort of technicals trader, you might look at this as being like an inverse head and shoulders. I don't think it's a very good inverse head and shoulders if that's what you're hoping for, but so far there's no reason to eject. My ejection point would of course be this support failing. If we fail this support, that means that we're losing this EMA. It means that we're probably going to head down to the bottom half of the RSI, and I think that would look very bad. We can look at this on the USDT pair, and it's a bit more interesting. You can see immediately that you have this overarching downtrend, like a very, very clear macro downtrend for this. And as we were talking about with Bitcoin, on the USDT price action, you get very big swings. Now, unlike Bitcoin, these swings seem to be chilling the fuck out, right? They seem to be getting smaller. So it's possible that we're stabilizing and that we might soon kind of find a bottom. We don't want to speculate too much on where that bottom might be just yet because it is quite volatile. But when we go to chart this, I think some things stand out very quickly. Something like this that catches the top of this, it catches the bottom of this whole price action, and it catches the recent top here. So it checks everything. It checks the history, it checks the recency, and unfortunately though we have this boy breaking through out here. So we want to figure out what's really the high point of this. Before we do that, I do want to get in support, and I think if you just look at the recent low here, you catch the tops of these wicks, it's very appealing. And something a lot of people will do is they want to work left to right, because that's how your brain usually processes text. And they want to check something like this little range here, and that's the bias. They're going to say, okay, well, it gets the tops of these, it gets the bottom, you have the top here, and you've got some wicking down here, so this is a good support, right? And in this case, it happens to be pretty solid, but in general, more recent price action is more valid, so you want to start from the right and work your way left. And if we're doing that, we're looking for a support. Yeah, the bottom of this is pretty reasonable. And if we go left as far as it makes sense to, yeah, we can actually throw down a line kind of like this. And it doesn't seem terrible. And if it really bothers you to cut some of this in half, then that's good. It should bother you. But we can put this in a very recent position and it lines up perfectly, so that's fine. That happens to be a very nice support. So we do have a very tight range here. We attempted to break out, and then we did what I told you I was worried about Sol doing. We attempted to break out, and then we moved to the bottom of the range and lost our EMA. So even though we're going sideways on this, on the USDT pair, I don't want a text box. Even though we're going sideways on this on the USDT pair, we do kind of just have a range right now. And this range, is it promising? Not really. I mean, we've got essentially a higher low, barely, on the macro. And we've got sort of a series of lower highs. But we have this weird breakout attempt. So we do need to see where is our actual resistance when we're talking about this breakout attempt. And eventually I will quit clicking on things I don't want to click on. But if we're looking toward the top of this, really it becomes a little tricky. You might, again, be tempted to do what a lot of people do and come to something like this and just extend it out. But when you do that, you can see immediately it doesn't respect any of this price action. Sure, you have a couple points. You have this nice wick here, and you've got a couple bottoms here, and some nice tops there. But it doesn't really respect all the price action. If you move it closer, it's just chopping all of this in half, right? It's not really catching much. So we want to see something more accurate. We want to look at more recent price action. And in this case, I think the best thing to do is just to basically ignore this stuff before it as being less legitimate. And you're going to either look for the top of the wick, or you're going to look for the tops of these candles. And either way, whatever your preference is, you're going to be all right. Now, you might also want to say, well, what about this? Can we move this more recent? Is this better? And that's fine as well. You're just going to catch like the very wick top of this. I'm not too concerned about that because it's very minuscule difference. But yes, you can mark this up just a little bit more if you want. And the temptation though is like, well, do I just keep going? Do I just mark the top of this then? I think it's fine to just call this the current range and to put our sights a little bit higher, because my issue, here's the key, my issue with marking this as a resistance is that closing above this meant nothing, right? Closing above this line really didn't mean anything. So if we go with this resistance, what's our confirmation? What did closing above this really mean for us? Well, it didn't mean anything. We immediately erased that and went back to support. So I don't really like that as much as a resistance. I think if we're going to talk about recency, we have to look at where a breakout would actually matter. And so if we're looking at where a breakout would matter, we're probably talking more about this level, right? You catch the bottoms of this, all of these candles are supported. You catch sort of the top of this reversal and you nest above this during this range. When this range fails, you come up and you retest it, and then you just abandon. Down here, there's all these different levels. But once you come up again, this level was more important, right? Because we couldn't break above it. Breaking above this yellow box didn't matter. So if we see something that wants to come up again, taking this level will be probably more poignant because it's been support through these areas here. So again, it's not a precise thing. When you're marking levels, you need to remember that they are kind of just zones. They're not exact prices. When we mark this as a resistance, we're not marking 37.38. We're just marking something around 37.40. So don't consider it like an exact to the penny thing that you need to follow. But this is where I would mark this. You could put your interim resistance around here as like an early warning system. If you want to be a gambler and you see us start to get up to here again, then yeah, sure, open your long and have an ejection point at this line. But otherwise, I think you have to look a little bit higher because this breakout didn't mean anything. And we immediately failed. We immediately lost the RSI. We immediately lost the EMA. And now we're looking at support. So if you look at how these tops kind of round out when they're going to fail, we're kind of getting that sort of thing happening again. Not as pronounced, but right now, even though we do have a nice macro uptrend, it looks like it's doing its best to give that up. So DeFi across the board hasn't looked great. If you look at Link, you have like this eternal support zone for Link. It's very, very clean with the tops of this on the weekly and the bottoms of this on the weekly. So we're on the weekly chart right now, and you can see that Link on the weekly is trying to give up support, very much trying to give up support, even though on the daily it's kind of done the same thing as Sol, right? Sol has this nice little move up, and then it tried to have a little breakout attempt and failed. And now it's just posting like a really crappy sort of hammer, where Sol did the sort of same thing. It had this big move up, it tried to get a little breakout, and now it's posting a shitty little hammer, which, you know, if you want to really mark it like Link, you would have to move your support up, but I'm not comfortable doing that. I don't really think it's necessarily accurate to pop that up any, but the charts are very similar, right? Even though Sol looks a little better, you might just consider other DeFi that are posting similar charts but failing to be an early warning system for something like Sol on the USDT pair. It's very possible, of course, that this just holds and we rock it off, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of buying pressure here. The wicks don't go very deep, so there's not a lot of selling pressure, but we're also not just like springing off of this immediately. If you look at how we had to try and break out, it had to be done in steps, right? We didn't just rock it up. We had a couple of days building up to this, and then it was immediately deleted. And I think that's a pretty bearish sign when you have a breakout attempt that is immediately deleted. You can see the same thing happening on Bitcoin, where you have something like this stair step up, this slow build to try and break resistance, and then it just gets deleted in one day, right? And this is where I was talking about a couple days ago. This is such a huge bearish sign to me, that bulls have to fight and fight and fight to try and just get to resistance, and then bears just laugh and smack them in the face and it goes away immediately. So that kind of thing, even if there's sort of some rounding off going here, I think this is your early signal that the bears are willing to step in and crush something. And we see that on Sol with this sort of thing where it takes so much work to get up to a resistance, and then the bears just laugh and bulls can't come back. They're not coming back at all. The bulls are not giving like the reverse fuck you. They're not doing something, you know, like I don't know what, like this, where bulls make a really nice push up, and then bears have to kind of fight a little bit to suppress it, fighting to suppress price, and then the bulls come in and just say, no, we're going up and you can't stop us, right? And then even though there ends up being some ranging here, this is like your early signal that, yeah, the bulls are going to win. And we have just the opposite here, where the bulls are really fighting, and the bears come in and just delete all the progress in a day. So that's kind of my early system, that even if we try another breakout or something, I would expect it at this point to probably fail. I would want to see, to be bullish, I'd want to see this upper boundary actually successfully pushed. And if that were to break, I would start looking toward the top of this as my first target. So it'd be a pretty significant upside if you're on leverage, especially this extending kind of all the way out here. You can see that it's the support for this entire range. So if we could move above this line and start heading back toward this would be a major resistance, and that will be a next point where you really look to probably scale out, take some profit, and wait to see what happens. But as far as right now, failing to break above this doesn't give me a lot of hope. It's not something that I want to be trading. I want to be looking at this or looking beyond this. I don't want to be trading this terrible little shitty hammer after all the bull's progress got deleted. But if you're a risk reward trader, then absolutely entering toward the bottom of this range is your nice risk reward spot, because if this range seems to fail, you just eject and you lose like almost nothing, right? If you go long from here and you eject when the range fails, you lose like 2% versus your upside. If you're bull and you're right, probably going to be over 10%, you know, 15%, something like that. Or you can just like try to hold all the way up there if you got big balls. So I think it's a good risk reward spot if you are bullish on Sol in the short term. But given the current price action, I am not. So that's not a trade I'm going to be taking. I do want to look at Bitcoin more in depth. We just mentioned it briefly in reference to Sol, but again, I've been pretty bearish ever since we had this failed breakout. And again, this sort of 3 days of work by bulls only to be deleted instantly by the bears was like, definitely we're going down. And the past few days, I've posted like, show me the bull case, where is it? Because everyone's just posting that they're so bullish and posting emojis, and that was because you had sort of this double bottom into this point of control that I've labeled black now, and everyone was super bullish there, and I was kind of confused why you would be bullish before having some kind of breakout confirmation. This was exactly what I warned of, having some kind of approach to resistance, approach to an EMA breakout, and then ultimately not being able to hold it and failing below the EMA, below the resistance again. And that's exactly what we've done. We attempted to break out, we attempted to take EMA and resistance, and we failed, and since then we have just died. So the only bull case that I really saw that anyone could point out to me was this sort of uptrend, this series of lower lows here, that of course has now failed, and we've broken down below that uptrend. So this nice little diagonal boy here is no longer valid, and we can get rid of him. As always, horizontals are more legitimate than diagonals. Diagonally speaking, we really don't have anything on the top side. There's really not anything too interesting on the bottom side. No matter where you try to draw this, there's nothing with like a 3-touch verification or anything. So right now there's absolutely no horizontal to be playing. There's just the macro trend, which is still down, and the horizontals. So an interesting thing with the bull case, speaking of, is that you had sort of this line right here, and this is what bulls were really excited about, because you had that uptrend and you had a double bottom, and those two things coming together seem very bullish. But they came up and they pushed resistance, and then they came to this point, which was a previous low, and started to spring, and everyone was ecstatic, right? Everyone was so excited about this, and all I said was, you need to break this black line or nothing matters. You need to break it and go way up and confirm it anywhere above. Doesn't matter where the confirmation is. It just has to break. It can be a tiny baby confirmation, but it has to break. And we closed above it for one day and then got completely annihilated by it. This line, suddenly, I promise you, this line that all the bulls were talking about, this 33.2 whatever, I promise you, all the people who were mega bullish because this was supposed to be a support, suddenly this level is not going to matter to them at all. Suddenly, after this acts as a support and then fails, and today is being retested as a resistance, suddenly that level is not going to matter at all to the bulls. It's not going to be confirmed as anything. They're going to suddenly just not care about it at all. It doesn't matter. The point of control is 35.5, or, you know, we're looking at 32k is all that matters, or something like that. They're going to move the goalposts. That line is just going to disappear. They're not going to care about it, even though it has acted beautifully through this whole area. In the defense, I would say that it shouldn't have mattered in the first place, because nothing in here respects this level. This whole double bottom area doesn't respect that level. But again, you got to favor recency, and if you look toward recent price action, there's a really good argument that this level does matter, and it matters especially today as we're confirming it as resistance. So that's something we might have to leave on our charts going forward. And if you missed it before, I've been saying with 2 touches here and the very obvious buying pressure being when we get close to this green weekly support, I don't expect there to be too much support coming from this daily. I've been saying that if we hit this for a 3rd time, I expect us to basically just teleport through it. I don't really think we're going to hold up if we revisit this level. If bulls can't, you know, step in for the rest of this candle today, it's got many hours left. There's like 10 hours for bulls to come in, so maybe they can save this. But if they can't and we lose this level, I don't expect it all for this 31.6 sort of bottoming area. There's double bottom's like a thing in technical analysis. There's really no such thing as a triple bottom because it doesn't tend to happen. If we come back here again, what we will have seen is that people are absolutely willing to sell Bitcoin in this yellow range, and they're not so willing to buy Bitcoin in this green range. That's what the price action shows us. People are more willing to sell than they are to buy, and we know that people are very willing to buy down here, so that's probably where we're going to go. No one wanted to sell the Bitcoin at 40k, but then no one wanted to keep the Bitcoin at 30k. So that's standard retail market for you. Buy low, sell high. Doesn't resonate very well with a lot of people, but our trend has maintained. Our average price action, as expected, is just kind of flowing down this channel, and it's not really deviating very much anymore. This is kind of stabilizing. You had this nice big breakout attempt and you had a nice big wick down here, but since then we've kind of just returned to a very tight movement along downward macro trend, so not expecting too much different sort of deviation to come out of here. And I know a lot of people like different indicators and all that. I've got to turn something off to continue using more of them, but if you look at other indicators that I don't usually post, you have like your Bollinger Bands, where if you're not familiar with how these work, you're basically just cutting this little cloud in half, and being on the bottom side of it isn't good. So we had this sort of attempt to break into the top half of this cloud. We ran into the top of it and just bounced the fuck off. So what this would give you hope for is that the bottom of the Bollinger Band cloud is going to be somewhere around daily support for you to bounce if you're a bull. But overall, just being in the bottom half of this is not very good if you're bullish. And it's kind of just, to me, it's sort of the same thing as EMA and RSI, where you can just tell if you're tending to be above a certain point that you're going to probably be bullish, and if you're tending to be below, then you're going to probably be bearish. So whatever kind of trader you are, we can look at other things that show us nothing good. What's a nice example? Like a lot of people like Fibonacci. So if you just check out the sort of top and bottom are extremes on this range. If you're a fib trader, again, you're looking basically at the halfway point. You want this 0.5 to be, above there is bullish and below there is pretty much bearish. So if you're a Fibonacci trader, you're looking at the fact that we came up to the 0.5 twice and rejected twice, and that should be pretty shitty for you as a fib trader. So there's all these different indicators you can point to, and as far as I'm concerned, they all tell the same story. And that's why you haven't seen bulls posting bullish charts. You just see people posting bullish tweets with no TA to back it up, because there's no TA to back it up. So it's easier to say slap yourself if you're selling Bitcoin here, or Bitcoin's going to be 128k, or Sailor's going to step in and buy whatever, and you can say all these things and you can put your emojis behind it, but when you come to the chart and you actually look at what the chart has, it's nothing that's good news if you're a bull. I love bear markets. I love trading bear markets much more than bull markets, and I think it's much harder to do for most people. There's the phrase that everyone's a genius in a bull market. Of course, all you have to do is buy and wait and it goes up. Then that's easy, but a lot of people, this is the first bear market. It's the first time they've had to wait more than like a week to make money. So you're seeing these people slowly trickle out. This is retail selling. This is not like institutional. This is not shorts being piled into, because a lot of people are still trying to long this and getting knocked out, and then they long it a little bit lower and they get knocked out, and they keep hoping, this will break, or this will hold, or this will hold, and they'll be longing all the way down to 28.8, I think. So the OI books are not really driving this at this point. I'm pretty firmly convinced that basically since this point, this move has been influenced mostly by retail. You can see that the The candles are very small. This is Bitcoin. We should be seeing, you know, 15% moves a day, and today we're seeing like a 2% move. So that's retail, man. That's people buying and selling spot. That's not people like hiding in and trying to pump and dump and anything like that. So Bitcoin looks pretty bad right now, especially when you have like altcoins leading the market in a bear market. That's usually really bad for Bitcoin. And it's actually some, if you want some 5-head 3D chess bullshit. 3D? Chess is already 3D. That's how bad at chess I am. But if you want the big brain play, like alts leading the recovery against Bitcoin is usually pretty bad for Bitcoin, but it's also usually pretty bad for alts. They don't tend to hold up. If Bitcoin continues to collapse, then people, they get this little spring from alts and they get really excited, but then they get trapped in altcoins, which start to lose their value because they're primarily paired against Bitcoin. And so they end up ejecting after you get a nice spring up. They think, okay, the bull market's here, look at alts exploding, and then they get trapped by something like this. And I think that's what's happening here. You can see this pretty simply on Ethereum. We had our daily level, and we might want to update that for recency and just put this as our current support or current resistance. So whatever your bias is here, you can draw like the tops of these and call this sort of spot like your resistance block. And I think that's like a fair enough on the daily. Let's tighten this up just a little bit. That's what she said. And we will make it look pretty. Yeah. So I want that to be about there. And to call this like your point of like you have to break this to be bullish would not be a stretch at all. If we want to update our support to be more recent, we could look at like the recent swing low here and call this kind of our support zone. So considering this, if I can ever expand this window, considering this to be our support zone, we have to think, okay, what's our position right now? Our position right now is posting this shitty hammer at support after all this progress from the bulls. Over a week of work from bulls, deleted in one fucking day by the bears. How can you be bullish now? You came up to a resistance block, which was a nice run. Like, I'm not saying this wasn't a nice ass run. This was great. You had a big red candle, hammer, big red green, classic reversal pattern. Bulls ran with that all the way up here. And they flipped this to support, they retested it, and they continued. And that's beautiful. That run was beautiful. What's not beautiful is getting this much work into coming to this resistance point, sort of close to the bottoms of these, and then having it deleted in one day. That's the kind of thing that you don't want to see if you're bullish, where you do all this work to move up and then just a 10% drop. That's what I was saying on Bitcoin. Where are the 10% moves? Where are the 15% moves? It's a lot of retail. So in losing this, we've lost our EMA again. We're back at support. We've lost the RSI again. We had huge selling volume. So it's a legitimate candle. It's not like a scam candle with like it moved this much, but there was no trade volume or something like that. So the volume profile checks out. And from here, what's our macro trend? Well, it's down. I mean, that's pretty simple to see, right? You do have some fluctuation above, below. But as ugly as this is, our macro trend is still down. You can't get too excited if you're a high time frame trader like I am about this little move up when you have something like this big move down. So what I see here is just something that looks like it's probably going to do this. Again, as I was talking about, where's the buying pressure? Well, the buying pressure isn't here because we're not moving, right? We're not moving up. There's no buying pressure here if we don't spring off of this level. there's obviously selling pressure here. Huge red candles coming off of this. You do all this work to get up here and then delete it. You do all this work to get up here, delete it. So there's huge selling pressure here. But where's the buying pressure? Well, the buying pressure is down here. Buying pressure is at the weekly. Just like Bitcoin, I expect us to continue toward that weekly. When you reject down into this support, reject down into this support, even if you crab a little bit here, unless there's some kind of breakout that confirms a continuation that this sort of local trend is going to run, then there's no reason to be too hopeful. And even if this local trend were to run, you have to consider that you've got a pretty high bar to pass to really, really call this like a macro reversal. We're way off our previous like swing high on a higher time frame. You're talking like, how much is this? A 30% increase? Yeah, you got to go up by a third to really reverse this market. That's not going to happen overnight. I think it will happen, but it's not going to happen just like, oh, we bounced off support and now we're at 3,600 again. You know, you'll have to really work your way up there and have some downs and ups. But right now, the way the setting pressure is coming off of this block and the way we're just kind of sitting on this support, even wicking below it, consistently wicking below it, it doesn't look great to me for the bulls, and I expect us to continue that trek downward into the weekly support where we see actual buying pressure, huge springs. Like when we hit this weekly, we just absolutely jumped. We hit this weekly, big jump, absolute reversal off of the weekly. So that's our biggest hope right now, is about 1600. And really, if you want to talk about the weekly, then let's look at the weekly chart. And this is why we do have a lot of dailies I just posted on there, so if you can ignore those, that would be great. I don't want to change all the settings for them to not show up right now, because this is going to be very quick. But I mean, this is nothing. This is nothing, right? It looks like a lot. It feels like it's been a lot because it's been a very stressful trading period. But all you've got is lower high, lower high, lower low, lower low. You've got two entire waves, like nothing really on the weekly. And we're starting out here. So yes, we had buying at the weekly level. We had our initial spring off this weekly level. So I think this purple line, this about 1700, is a very, very reasonable target. I'm actually thinking more toward the 1400, but I don't really see us recovering before the 1700. I would be very interested to long the 1700. I'm not really interested to long something like this 2k, you know, just the top of this. Even though it's been a support very recently, the fact that it's a lower low with a lower high doesn't give me the confidence to enter a long on that on the high time frame. So very quickly, we're going to just blast through a couple altcoins. We looked at Link and how that's basically failing in the same way that Sol is failing right now on the daily, with this sort of weak hammer trying to hang on to support. Really needs to push this range. ETH dying very slowly on the daily, same thing, just a hammer on top of support that's trying to desperately hold on after a lot of bearish push down. Litecoin, same thing, it's got a little hammer here, a little hammer just above support after bearish pressure down. So I think all of these are going to basically react the same way. It doesn't matter which horse you put your money on, because all the horses look the fucking same right now. We go to Tron. Oh look, big surprise. It's got a hammer after some bullish push down just above a support. Like, this is not exciting stuff. There's not really like a special shitcoin that's going to save you when all the other ones are, you know, doing whatever. So it's not really even worth looking at most shitcoin charts, because they're all the same. You could just watch like Ethereum, and whatever Ethereum does, probably all of the altcoins are going to do. Speaking of shitcoins, here's Doge. These were my entry on the short was this top black line, and then I got out today on this bottom black line. and that's worked out very well for me. So you might be aware, because I tweeted about it very openly, Elon made a tweet that kind of pumped up the price action, and I jumped down to the 4-hour and I saw this tweet a little bit late. I think it was something like this point. Actually, was it here? With this huge volume. It must have been here. It must have been this huge volume candle that gave it a nice little pump. So I entered short because the macro is down, right? The macro is down. Elon's a fucking tool. He doesn't own any of this, so he can't get in trouble for manipulating markets. But just looking at that macro, seeing it jump up so much on a 4-hour just because some guy who doesn't even own any tweeted. So I shorted this from here. I had to get in and out a couple times, but ultimately I got out when I saw this kind of reversal happening on this low time frame. So I think I might have even gone, yeah, I went to the 1 hour, and that's why I ended up getting out. So I started to get a bad feeling about it. You see this huge red, a nice long doji, and then a huge green to follow it up, and I said, okay, that's enough for me. That looks like a bottoming reversal. I'm gonna get out of here. We're oversold. We've got this classic reversal pattern, and so I ejected here. I'm interested to short it again, but of course I want to see how high this run is going to go, how high it might spring off of that level before I enter into some other short. I'm really looking for 18 cents on this, but I would expect maybe the bottom of this previous formation. You can see that there's a lot of selling pressure there. So if we can get that high again, I would be very interested to short from this spot and look for either another spring off of this level, or for that level to just fail, then I would hold for 18. So Doge is making me a ton of money by just going against Elon, really. But that'll be it for tonight. All the alts, they look the same. There's no reason to believe that some alt is special. All the high caps, that's why I'm looking at Doge, Tron, Litecoin, ETH. High caps are going to have legitimate price movement. If your shitcoin is like 100 million market cap, then yes, of course it's going to have big jumps, because very small buys and very small sells can move the price a lot. But if you look at these high caps, something like ETH, something like Link, you can see that they all look pretty much the same. They all have these hammers. Thank you very much for that follow. They all have these same hammers, and they're all just sitting on support. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad somebody stopped by and wants to listen to my very, very pleasant voice annotate these shitcoins that all look terrible. I bring nothing but bad news. I'm amazed anyone wants to be here. But just hammers after dumps, under EMAs, sitting on supports, still in the bottom half of the RSI. Nothing looks good. Bitcoin, as much as bulls are going to now try and retcon this line and just pretend it didn't exist, it is confirming as a resistance right now. With about 10 hours left to go in the daily, the bulls have to take this point in the next 10 hours if they're going to continue moving up. If they're going to make this some sort of spring like this, they got about 10 hours to do it. Otherwise, this is not going to hold up for a third test. We're going to head down to 28. And Sol, again on the Bitcoin pair, Sol looked good until this giant red candle here. I don't like that it's doing the same thing as every other altcoin and just posting a little hammer like right under a resist support point. I don't like that at all. I think that's a bad look, and if there's going to be a resistance, not a resistance but a reversal, I would expect it to be here. On the USD pair, you're just ranging. Whether you want to consider this the range or this the range doesn't really matter. You are just ranging, and you have to acknowledge the fact that the macro trend is down. So unless this line breaks, I'm not interested in Sol on the USD pair, because this line breaking and closing above didn't mean anything. It really didn't mean anything. And this line breaking is going to give you access to this whole range, which gives you a much higher target, much higher profit potential. However, if you are a bull and you want to get into something now and start aiming for big gains up toward that. Your downside risk is only about 2%, whereas your upside gain maybe 25% or something. So it's not a terrible place to enter if you want to long this, but personally I don't think it looks good enough to, and I'm not going to be touching it here. Right now I'm not in any position as far as leverage goes. I'm just looking for probably a reversal around this blue, where we've seen the setting pressure from this wick and we've seen previous support. That's all I'm interested in right now. Shorting the fuck out of Doge and then taking all the money off the table I can get. If you have any requests, anything you'd like to see in USD or Bitcoin pair, please throw it in chat. Send me a DM, put it on Twitter, and tell me what coin and pair you want to see. You can request as much as you want. I don't mind at all. Gives me something to do, gives me a lot of practice, and it's always welcome. Otherwise, that's going to be it for tonight. So best of luck to you all in your trades. I hope you make a lot of money, and no problem. Glottal Stop. That's a wonderful name. I love that. That's very linguistics. Very highbrow name there. But thank you for coming by. Thanks for keeping me company here. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.